Oh, look, thank you so much for this invitation. Shall I start, Alan, by bringing the slides up, and then we can get into our conversation. So I know I've got the capacity to share my screen, so let me do that now to start us off, because there's a lovely photograph to start us off. So, Alan, why don't you start by introducing yourself, given we've got some lovely pictures of some of your children here.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie, and thank you, Richard. As Richard said, I'm the CEO of the Bedfordshire Schools Trust. We've got 10 schools, 5 nurseries. We run education from 0 to 18, and I've been a head teacher for around 20 years now. I teach a CEO for around 20 years, and I've always been tremendously interested in the emotional side of headship. And that's, I guess, my mindfulness journey. However, about four or 5 years ago, I decided to come out, if you will, and share this practice with the members of my community. And I think what we're going to talk about in the next 15, 20 minutes is our school's journey.
Great, thanks, Alan. Yes, so as Richard said, I've worked as a school leader in supporting leadership development and practice mindfulness now for many years, and I guess my journey through this has been a growing sense of the current approach to leadership development is somewhat limited, largely because it's mainly about the outer world of leaders, important though it is, policies, finance, improving the quality of teaching and learning. Many people who are here today will have experienced that. But it's not sufficient. And the work I've been doing and the work Alan and I have been doing together has been giving leaders, senior leaders, principals, chief execs of multi-academy trusts the opportunity to go inward into their inner world. And Alan, from the work we've done, it's been a revelation, I think, for all of us in terms of the difference it has made to leaders and to us, keeping that 50-50 attention on our inner world and on our outer world, even though it's not easy personally, and it's not easy professionally. So Alan, why don't we just share the conversation we're going to have, and then you can start us off and share the journey you've been on. So we're going to do 3 things in the time we've got together. We're going to have a look with Alan at the mindfulness journey that the Bedfordshire Schools Trust has been on, and what Alan's learned from that incredibly insightful journey and experience. And then I'm going to say a little bit about what we're learning about changing school culture through mindfulness. And then we're going to leave a bit of time, Richard, towards the end, I hope, for reflections from people who are here today and from us. So please feel free to switch the chat on. We'd be happy to see that. So Alan, there's been a lot already today about the importance of a whole school approach and the importance of senior leaders really seizing, embodying and modelling mindfulness. And I can't think of anyone better really to share that experience with us. So over to you.
Thank you. So our journey really is over 3 years, I guess. Well, when we set it up, we had this 3-year vision, and it looks a little bit like this. The 3's crossed out. I'll come back to that in a short while. So the first phase, if you will, was kind of get people to understand the why. Well, why are we doing this? And this was about raising awareness and introducing people to mindfulness. And I thought key at that time was to really to share my story, if you will. And very briefly, around 2007, I was very poorly. My school was doing very, very well, but I was kind of burnt out really, and thought I've got to do something about this. I've got to sort this out. And that was the beginning of my mindful journey, I suppose. And I shared that with people, and that was quite a tricky thing to do. But it sort of underlined the benefits of mindfulness to me personally in my practice. And this sort of at least piqued the interest of many people. And I think we've heard this today already, but I've spent an awful lot of time saying well-being is really important. Absolutely important, as important as anything we do. If we have happy children, they learn. If we have happy teachers, they teach well. And that's been a core message that we've tried to develop at Bedfordshire schools. The second thing was I wanted a reference point. So we launched a trust-wide consultation around having compassion as one of our values. And that sort of led to lots of interesting discussions about what compassion means and how it related to kindness and other concepts like that. I will come back to that in a moment. And the third thing we did was we offered everybody a training program. If you're interested in mindfulness, we will guarantee that we will provide you with a training opportunity in mindfulness. So that was year one, if you will. Year two was about trying to embed the practice. And again, I felt it began with me, that I had to embody a mindful approach, that I had to both be the advocate and the example for this. And I'm naturally an introvert, so that was quite a tricky thing to do. But that was the kind of the path I embarked upon. The second thing was to try and develop a strategy or a container for holding this mindfulness practice. So we set up a strategy group, which is interesting because the word strategy we're kind of beginning to replace with a practice group. So the whole vocab has changed significantly since we started the journey, and we've had an approach, or we're nurturing an approach where all our schools have got a slightly different pathway and are in exploring mindfulness in a different way. And what we're finding is that mindfulness or mindful practice is just seeping in to everything we do. And of course, we have done lots of very practical things to sort of move this forward. So we do have a wellbeing charter, for example, everybody signs up to. We do have self-care targets within our appraisal. We have CPD, like most schools have, but we have self-care. What are you doing this year about you? You know, how are you looking after you this year? Which is that two wings that Maggie was talking about, the internal and the external aspect of, I guess, of being human almost. And all our schools have mindfulness leads which connect our practice. It's really important. Again, an earlier speaker talked about the connection and the power of connection in human flourishing. So that's what we've been doing this year, but we've found out that we definitely need more than a year to embed this practice. So we're expanding the embedding of practice for another year. Maggie, if you just go to the next slide, please. Sure. So this is the value that we launched, and you will know is the courage to be compassionate. And we do think it takes courage. We had a long discussion about this, to actually sit in that compassionate position and treat everyone with respect, you know, even when times are hard. So, you know, rather than blame somebody for something they've done, you know, if something goes wrong, we seek to explore our relationships. Well, why has that gone wrong? And that's resulted in the deepening of relationships and better relationships, stronger relationships going forward. Rather than criticizing someone if they do something that wasn't expected, shall we say, that has enabled us to explore different ways of doing things. So again, just changing the way we look at everything we do in the everyday. Underneath it, there's an image there. So as I've said, all our schools have got a different approach to mindfulness, their own path, if you will. And this is one of our schools who had a whole school consultation, Pixbrook School, and the children came out with, you know, what does it mean to be compassionate? And some quotes that inspired them to be compassionate. And this is a huge wall. I don't know how long it is. I'm going to say 20 meters, but someone will probably tell me it's much less or much more, I don't know. But when you go in the entrance of this school, compassionate is big time, you know. And there are similar displays of our values in the other schools. So next slide, please, Maggie. So that's kind of the individual school approach. And this is the trust approach. So one of the commitments the trust has given is that we will provide all our schools with wellbeing and mindfulness gardens, a safe place in which to practice individually or as groups. So this is from Eatonbury School, one of our schools, and they've developed this garden. So this school has Mindful Mondays, where all staff are invited to just go and have some time of reflection to get themselves ready for the week. So it's a combination of individual paths that the schools follow, and then ourselves as a trust supporting and encouraging that. Okay, next one then, Maggie, please. So what's the impact been? You know, everyone talks about impact. You've got to show impact, you know. I've tried to change the vocab a little bit on this by saying, do you know what, the impact perhaps isn't instant, and the impact can be felt over time, and we've got to think about this. Nonetheless, we have, every time we do a course, we have formal evaluations of our courses. And as you can see, over the last almost 2 years, I guess, 2 academic years, we've trained about 115 people in mindfulness, about 15% of our community. 12 of our community have gone on to do formal teacher training with MISP, and they're beginning to introduce mindfulness practice into the work with the children. So that's fantastic, I think. The second area of impact, I suppose, is the responses, and we can sort of categorize the responses into 3 areas. Firstly, generally, staff feel more relaxed. Generally, staff feel good about themselves, and generally, staff begin to think more clearly. This is what they're saying. So both a well-being type response, positive response, and also an effectiveness type response. And then I've just chosen 3 statements that come from staff evaluations, and I think these have got real power. I notice people more, and I lead with kindness. That's what I want. You know, I want us to connect as a group of people. We are people, you know. I'm able to switch off from work when I choose. I don't want people, staff, going home and worrying about what the next day looks like. You know, I want us in the present moment. I want to enjoy. I want people to come into school with a skip in the stride, you know, and enjoy and flourish as being part of our community. And then finally, I have strategies to handle my mental and emotional well-being. So again, it's about equipping people with a toolkit to be the best they can be. And I echo a lot of research has been mentioned today, you know, staff being stressed. I think, I might be wrong in here, but my peers, most of them have retired or gone on and done other things now. I feel I've got the energy to go on and do a few more years at least, you know, and I'm sure at least part of that is by my mindfulness practice. So it's been a rip-roaring success over the last 2 years, really, at best. Okay, so what's next for us, really? What we're trying to do is support and connect people. So we're introducing this mindfulness portal in September. And in preparation for that, we've produced a series of mindfulness stories. We're encouraging the 100+ staff that have been part of our training, that have developed a regular practice, to tell us their story. And they've been, oh my goodness, inspiring and humbling at the same time. When people have shared their experience, mindfulness has touched their lives, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. It's been enabled them to deal with family trauma and all sorts of things, really. So that is our shared mindfulness narrative that we will in some way bind our community together going forward. Mindfulness event. So anybody who's interested in our story, I think there's a flyer in the handbook, the goodie handbook. Please get in touch, because we are keen to connect with other like-minded schools and communities, and we are looking in the not too distant future to begin to hold various events, retreats, and so on, to sort of develop this larger Sangha, if you want, for an expression. And then we're for the first time, we're employing a mindfulness coach. It's quite tricky to get through governors that have got that, you know, hard, what exam results like, that clear strategy target. I'd like a mindfulness coach. Why do you want a mindfulness coach? Well, it's to support people. It's about their well-being. It's absolutely right that the conversation changes. I agree with Maggie that leadership development is only partial, because we are largely not dealing with the emotional side of leadership. And the leader, my school leaders, buy into mindfulness big time, but they're beginning to say, well, how do we do this? How do we develop this culture? And they're the types of conversations we're having at the moment. So we from September, we are employing a mindfulness coach. Somebody has been trained by Miss Batchley to work with both staff, leaders, and the pupils. So that's kind of what's next for us.
Yeah. Great. Oh, thank you, Alan. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and comments in a moment. I'm just going to say a little bit about changing school culture through mindfulness. And I want to start by saying, actually, I really do feel there's lots of reasons to be hopeful. Because as I work with schools and as I work with multi-academy trusts, I'm noticing that the sort of way in which they are working is beginning to be more compassionate, is beginning to be more attentive. They are attending more because of the pandemic to the emotional side of leadership. I was with a group of schools yesterday, the Schools of Tomorrow partnership, and they're talking about how do we lead future-facing schools. And Jamie, I used your work with them, and they absolutely loved it, but they never used the word mindfulness. So I do think there's an awful lot going on in schools that sits under the umbrella of cultivating a mindfulness and a compassionate culture in our schools. And I do believe that there are far more schools out there than we think. So I do have reasons to be hopeful, but I think it's conversations we need to keep having. So a lot of the conversation Alan and I have had is about the word mindfulness, because it can be off-putting. As one head teacher said to me, don't talk to me about mindfulness, Maggie. It's all crystals and muesli. That was his starting point. So it is about the language, and it's about the invitation. So rather than saying, and we've debated this, haven't we, Alan, with your principals, would you like to train in order to be more mindful? Would you like to explore how to be more mindful? Oh, sounds a bit odd. But if the invitation is, do you want to know how to let go of work at the end of the day, week or year? Do you want to know how you can skillfully handle those racing thoughts that wake you up at 3 a.m? Do you want to sustain your emotional, physical and mental resources as a teacher or a leader for the long term? Well, the answer is going to be yes. So welcome to mindfulness. This is all done through the lens of mindfulness. So we do need to be, I think, very attentive to our language, whilst at the same time, very true to the traditions and the core practices that underpin mindfulness. And I think it's a path that we're constantly walking. So the challenge for us in schools, I think, is it's not like any other change process or intervention, because we can't mandate it. As Alan said, it's not a strategy, but it's a practice. It's not an intervention. And we've had so many interventions in schools that we're brilliant at interventions, but it's not an intervention. It's an invitation. So we need to be led differently. It can't be imposed. I mean, I dread the day it is imposed, because that will be the end of it. It can't be imposed, but it can be modelled. So it's how we are, not what we say. And it's not a set of tips and techniques. And I do sometimes see it falling into that in schools, tips and techniques, but a personal practice with a commitment to embody it moment by moment and day by day. And I think, Alan, what we found is the building of a regular personal practice by the leaders and the teachers is essential. And it's probably the hardest part of what we engage in with them. So just a couple of quotes there from Helen and Kathy, who are having similar journeys, trying to do similar work to Alan. And you can see that, this drip, it seeps in, it will always remain invitational and so on, is a core part of the way that these chief executives are thinking. So changing school culture through mindfulness, reasons to be hopeful, but we've never done anything like this before. We haven't a blueprint for it. It's different. And the more we work together to explore it, the better. So Alan, let's just end maybe with your reflections, then open up for the group to see if anybody's got anything they'd like to reflect on or say.
I was just going to say it's, being a head teacher for, I'd say, about 20 years, this is the most interesting thing I've ever done, really, because it is very much working with people from the inside out, and seeing the change when it happens is extraordinarily powerful. Also, that once people get involved with mindfulness, the positive outcomes are overwhelming. I'm not sure that in the over 100 people who've had to do one of our courses, we've had much, if any, negative feedback. But it is encouraging people to have a look, and once they sort of open the gate to their own individual path, the results are stunningly positive. I think we've got work to do understanding the longitudinal impact of the work. We're very early days. Of course, what my board would like to see is how is this impacting on retention rates, and how is this impacting on attendance, and how is this impacting on results, all those type of things. And I do think we can begin to map that out a little bit. But for me, there's a common sense sort of feeling that happy teachers teach better and happy children learn better. And I do think an earlier speaker said about children picking up on the behaviors of adults. Well, if adults are stressed and struggling with life, the children will pick up on that without a doubt. And my final thought is it might be hard, but it's tremendously rewarding.
Right, thanks, Alan. So look, let's stop the sharing so we can see the chat. We haven't got time for questions, but we probably do have time if people want to pop in just their reflections on some of what Alan and I have been saying, or what's come up in your mind as we've been talking. It would just be lovely to see that, and we can see them here coming up, Alan. You've got jobs to do here, Alan. Yeah, look, Alan, let's just pick up that one from Catherine as they come up, because there's been this real tussle, hasn't there, about offering opportunities to be on a programme or to have a dedicated time for practice in the school day or after school or on Saturdays, and that's definitely not yet resolved, is it?
No, it's not resolved. The difficulty is the staff perception that it is an extra. It's something extra to do rather than a way of being, and it's something that's a giver and something that will actually take pressure off people, and dealing with that is really tricky. And I've looked at the corporate world, and often the way the corporate world get around that is sort of putting big money in it and enabling people to go off site for a couple of days. Very, very difficult in the school context. So we try all sorts of ways of doing this in terms of looking for when people might have non-contact periods. And that's one of the advantages of having our own mindfulness coach on site, but also trying to, because we're 10 schools, I think it might be facilitated a little bit, but looking at times where we can get a group of teachers and the day can start a bit later or finish a bit earlier, so we can have a session 8 o'clock to 10 or 3 o'clock till 5. But it is a challenge without a doubt. For me, a lot depends on the head teacher. If the head teacher is really keen, and I have got a mixed bag, and I think we can grab our inset day, and do it over a couple of inset days, the training, which is really, really good. I think MISP have been really good too, in terms of offering the different ways of delivering the various courses. And it is a little bit about, it's sort of, you treasure what you measure, that thing that's been said today, and that, because I relentlessly talk about the importance of mindfulness, I think that has landed now.
Great, thank you.